They're two happy women bringing you inspiring stories, politics, pop culture, and lifestyle hacks, all with an eye to making our communities and our country a better place to live. It's the Happy Women Podcast with your hosts, Jen Horn and Katie Gorka.
Thanks for joining us and welcome to another episode of the Happy Women Podcast. I'm Jennifer Horn.
And I'm Katie Gorka.
And, Kamala Harris she's been a little up and down, I think, Katie. A little ebb and flow is probably the way that we would put the rise and fall and rise. She's sort of like a yo-yo in more ways than one. Kamala Harris obviously got the bump when she was coronated as candidate for the Democrats. And now she's starting to struggle a bit. The pressure's on. The polling has started to turn. She's had a couple of interviews that she's been forced into that didn't go so well. And so to get the real story about where Kamala Harris is today as we are in the run-up to Election Day, we had to call in the expert. And the expert is Ed Morrisey. He is managing editor at one of our sister publications here at Salem, Hot Air. It's absolutely fabulous. You should check it out every single day for your latest news, hotair.com. Ed Morrisey is here. You can also follow him on X at Ed Morrisey. Ed, thanks so much for being here.
Well, thanks, Jen. Thanks, Katie. Great to be here. Great to be talking with you today.
All right. So tell me if I'm right in my assessment that Kamala Harris is definitely, maybe the honeymoon period might be over now with Democrats and with independents. Where do you think we are today with the Kamala phenomenon?
Well, I think what happened here is that she was able to stretch this the joy vibe out until the first and only debate, I would say, with Donald Trump. Doesn't look like they're going to have another one, and that worked for her until it didn't, right? I mean, I think that you can only go so far with that, and then you have to start offering some substance, and she just hasn't been able to do that. And I think that they thought it was going well until maybe about a week ago, or maybe even a couple of weeks ago, when you started to see trend lines going the other direction. And that's, of course, when they decided to do the 60 Minutes interview, which did not go so well. And then they wanted to do one with Fox News and Bret Baier, which was an utter disaster yesterday.
So to talk a little bit more about the interview with Bret Baier, why, in your take, what was so bad about it? What went wrong with that?
Well, what went wrong with it is that, first off, the reason why she's on Fox News was to stop the bleeding with men and to get an opportunity to gain access to that particular slice of the electorate, the one that follows Fox News. Now, that is not a Trump skeptical audience. You know, certainly MSNBC would be a Trump skeptical audience. So you can run the disqualification argument there, and you're probably going to be singing to the choir. But if you're going to go on Fox News to make the case that you're a better choice for a Fox News type of audience, you have to present a case for yourself, not a case against the guy that most of them like. Or at least most of them would feel comfortable sending back to the White House. And instead, every time that Bret Baier pressed Kamala Harris on an issue or a position that she'd taken, rather than explain the position or the issue or her values on that, she kept going back to Donald Trump. Every single answer. She mentioned Donald Trump herself personally 21 times in 26 minutes. Wow. And I went through the transcript. Fox News sent out the transcript, which, by the way, CBS still hasn't done with the 60 Minutes interview. And I went through and I literally counted up. I just did a Control F on Trump, and I counted up when she said it, because of course, obviously, Bret Baier mentioned Donald Trump too during the course of the interview, but she mentioned Donald Trump 21 times. Most of the time, it was to answer a question that Bret Baier was asking about her record and comparing it to what she used as her positions in 2019. And also when she's talking about, or when he was asking about the performance of the Biden-Harris administration on the issues that she claims that she's going to turn the page on. I mean, it was a strange decision to go on Fox News if all you were going to do is argue that Donald Trump is disqualified for the presidency. It's the wrong audience for that.
I'd also say that the questions that Bret Baier asked were not necessarily unexpected. Yeah, they were probably tougher questions than she had gotten, but they're pretty easy. I mean, they were all about her record, about immigration, about transgender prisoners, about turning the page. And she's been in, I mean, it's nothing like it was out of left field. And you read through the transcript, and I do think it's funny that he said Donald Trump 21 times, because literally Steve Doocy said it on Fox and Friends this morning. If you had played a drinking game, you'd be on the floor by minute 3. She was referencing Donald Trump so much, right?
Right.
But what do you think about Bret Baier's performance? You're a journalist, and a lot of people on the left are now criticizing him for what they're calling a gotcha interview. Now, I didn't hear it, but did you see something like that in the transcript?
No, and in fact, when I got the transcript, one of the reasons why I wanted to get the transcript is I wanted to read through the questions, and I watched it when it aired. So I was watching it live, and I'm tweeting about it. So sometimes you lose track of what was said by whom, and you have to go back and look at the actual data to just make sure that your first impressions are, supportable. So I wanted to see that because I wanted to see if there were gotcha questions or unfair questions. And so I literally cut and pasted every single question he asked and every form that he asked it in into a post. And I said, tell me which of these questions were unfair. Tell me which of these questions are irrelevant to voters in an election. Tell me which of these questions don't have to do with either her position, her performance, her values, or her history. They're all substantive. There's nothing in there that's an unfair question, especially for somebody who's a sitting vice president, who's replacing a president for the first time ever in American history. The person who won the nomination as an incumbent president was pushed off the ticket, and she was put in his place. And she was asked about that, and literally her answer was, well, Joe Biden's not in the ballot, which is what the question is. Why isn't Joe Biden on the ballot? If he's not capable of doing it, how long have you known that he was not going to be able to do it? That was the question. And she refused to answer it. Joe Biden's not on the ballot. Donald Trump's on the ballot. And he kept trying to ask it. And these were like 3 or 4 of the Donald Trumps, by the way. Donald Trump's on the ballot. Donald Trump's on the ballot. Donald Trump's on the ballot. It was terrible. Those were questions she should have known were coming. They're not out of, like you said, Jen, they're not out of left field. Those are questions that you can expect from a adversarial reporter in an interview, which I would say most Republicans understand adversarial interviews because that's what most of their interviews are with the mainstream media.
So my co-author, Mike Gonzalez, and I have an article up at The Blaze where we make the case that Kamala is a Marxist, that her views are actually Marxist. And we argue why they're fundamentally Marxist. So my question to you is, do you think she's doing so badly in these interviews and these instances because she's dissimulating? She's trying to hide her truly sort of radical views, and it's awkward and difficult to come across as a moderate when you are in no way moderate? Or do you think she's just not smart, or she's not politically skillful?
Yes.
Okay. Fair.
No, I will expand on that. Sorry, I don't mean to leave you hanging, Katie, but I will expand on that. Yes. I mean, she's an attorney. Obviously, she's educated. She's accomplished as an attorney. Not every attorney is a good politician. And I don't think she's a good politician. I think she's gotten a free ride because of political connections and because of fashion, basically. Again, she was running in California, so it's very easy for a progressive to win elections in California. And even then, for her attorney general, she won an election in San Francisco as DA. Her attorney general race, she barely won that against a Republican in the same election where Democrats in other statewide offices were winning by double digits. She's not very good at this. And it's showing, and it's been showing. She was doing these media interviews in 2019 and failing at them. She failed out of the 2020 primary processes in 2019, of course, despite having tons of advantages going into that cycle. By the time you get to June 2021 and Lester Holt's interview on NBC, the one where he says, "You haven't been to the border," and she says, "Well, I haven't been to Europe either." The White House finally had enough of her and basically put her on a shelf. And that's where she sat for 3 years until she took over for Joe Biden. She does not have the experience at doing this. She hasn't built up the muscle memory. Right? I know we talk about with athletes, you do repetitive things so you build up the muscle memory. JD Vance has had adversarial interviews ever since he decided to get into politics. So he's prepared more now than he was a couple of years ago to do something like this. And he's good at it. She's not good at it. And there's no real evidence that she's good at the actual governing part of this either. And that's what you're supposed to be looking at that's the reason why you have primaries, first off. And I would say that's the reason why the Democrats should have had a competitive process in the convention so that they could actually suss this out before they stuck somebody at the top of a ticket who wasn't really prepared to handle the pressure.
I want to ask you about that strategically, actually, based on a couple of conversations I've been having on my radio show. They did have a primary. They had a primary back in 2019, and she failed miserably at the primary because she doesn't stand for anything, because she is not likable. Barack Obama had terrible policies, but he was able to sell himself because he was a great orator. He was able to sell that to people. She does not have that. But I do want to ask you, and this is just, maybe, I don't know, I'm a conspiratorial column just a little bit, but the Democrat Party they pulled a big one on us, right? I mean, they take Joe Biden out, they create their own set of rules to bring Kamala Harris and put her in. The question is, why her? Now, the obvious answer is, how do you jump over a vice president who is female and who is a woman of color, right? That's really difficult for a party that builds himself on DEI to do. But you would think that if they really wanted to do anything, that they could have brought in a Gavin Newsom or a Gretchen Whitmer or somebody that they think might have done a little bit better. Why do you think it was Kamala? Was it the DEI thing, or do you think that she'll be out of the way completely now? If she does lose to Donald Trump, her political career is really, it's over after this.
Well, I think it's mostly because Joe Biden handpicked her. Mm-hmm. And I think that this was Joe Biden's way of sticking it back to Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, and Barack Obama. Mm-hmm. Remember, he was blowing up at them. The whole Biden team was blowing up at Obama and Pelosi. And Nancy Pelosi's telling people still to this day that he won't return her phone calls any longer. Yeah. And there's a reason for that, because they stuck a knife in his back. And I think he thought he still could win. And if you look at the polling, there was at least an argument that he was still competitive as of, July 20th before he pulled out the next day. But I think that he was basically saying, if you're going to do this, I'm going to make sure you pay for it. And he's a vindictive kind of guy. And I think that that's what that was. I think some of these other things, she may have ended up with it at the convention anyway, for the same reason that you're talking about, which is that you really can't go over the head of the sitting vice president in a situation like that, especially because she was picked as a bridge to the progressive future. That was the reason, Joe Biden said that. And also because he explicitly said that the next nominee should be black and female. And I'm going to pick a vice president that does that so we can model that. That was the argument he made in 2020. It would be very difficult to get around that, but at least you would have had a chance to test her out a little bit, even if it was for a couple of weeks, to see if she could actually handle interviews. And now they're getting what they got. And this is not, and she's not an unknown quantity. She was bad enough at this that the White House shoved her off to the side and basically kept her away from the media for 3 years. Mm.
So in our last couple minutes, one of the issues that's really blown up in the last couple days, definitely here in Virginia, but also in Texas, Alabama, a number of different places, is the issue of non-citizen voting. Mm-hmm. Are you concerned about non-citizen voting? How much of a factor do you think this is going to be in the election?
Well, I'm concerned about it in some of the blue states. And I think, Virginia's been, Glenn Youngkin's been doing a pretty good job in a purple state trying to minimize that. I'm not as concerned about it in places like Texas because, Texas, they're cracking down on this. There's a story that was out, I think, a couple of days ago that they're rounding up these special interest aliens that have been coming across the border that are from Iran, from the Democratic Republic of Congo, that sort of thing. And Texas is arresting them because the federal government won't do it. So they've been cracking down on that here. I would say that I don't think it's going to be a decisive impact on the presidential election. I don't even think it'll be a decisive impact on Senate elections. Depending on where you're at and who you're talking about, maybe a couple House elections would be at risk because of this. But the scale of it is probably too diffused across the U.S. to really impact the presidential or Senate races. So concerned about it. It shouldn't happen. We should really be, that's the reason why you have voter ID and the reason why we should be insisting that, we prove that we're citizens when we register to vote. But I think that I'm not as concerned about it. I don't think it's a top line concern. I'm more concerned about the ground game of the Republican Party and whether or not they actually have people out in the ground doing what needs to be done. And that, to me, is a bigger issue in terms of getting a turnout for the GOP.
All right, last minute, Ed Morrisey. I know everybody hates predictions. Is it Trump? Is it Harris? And do Republicans get the Senate? Do they keep the House? What happens?
I'm just looking at the trend lines, and as we're seeing it right now, just under 3 weeks out from there, you're seeing the betting markets suddenly veer very sharply to Trump. I think that you're looking at a pretty good map and some pretty good numbers for Republicans in Senate races. I think that you see Trump win, and I think you get a narrow Republican majority in the Senate. I don't know about the House. I think the House is really up for grabs.
House really scares me. And the House is running through my home state of California, I really believe. And there are some tight races that Democrats are spending lots of money on. Ed Morrisey, thank you so much for spending some time with us today. Managing editor over at Hot Air, hotair.com. For all your latest news, give him a follow as well at Ed Morrisey. And Ed will check in again with you soon. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you so much.
It's no secret. The world's unpredictable. One moment, everything's fine, and the next, the power's out and the cell towers are down. But with a satellite phone from sat123.com, you don't have to be cut off from the world. No matter where you are or what's happening, Sat123 keeps you connected. Whether you're deep in the mountains, on the road, or dealing with a natural disaster, your satellite phone will work when nothing else does. This is about being prepared. Sat123.com is family-owned, American-built, and focused on keeping you safe. They understand that in today's world, connection is more than convenience. It's essential. So here's the deal. Go to sat123.com and use code Katie for $25 off your first purchase. Don't get caught off guard. Stay connected. Stay prepared with Sat123.
So great to get that perspective from Ed Morrisey. He does such a great job over at Hot Air. But Katie, I have to dig in on this story about the illegals and the voting, because as we approach the election, this is a huge, huge issue in multiple states. And actually, we have to bring you in on this one because in the state of Virginia, the Biden administration is suing Governor Glenn Youngkin because he removed some names from the voting rolls. But these names, by the way, were self-described illegal immigrants. These are people who acknowledged the fact that they were here illegally, and they pulled those people off the voter rolls. The Biden administration sues to put them back on. And I know you've been going all over the place, TV. You're like media tour superstar because this story has blown up. And you guys in Fairfax County, where you're the chairwoman of the GOP, have really had a piece in bringing this story to the masses.
Well, I think it's interesting that it's really blowing up because, first of all, the fact that the Biden administration, as well as some of the leftist NGOs, they have decided to fight the removal of non-citizens from voter rolls. I mean, I'm sorry, what a stupid fight. And it looks so terrible. It looks so terrible that what the Biden administration is fighting for is non-citizens to be able to vote. That makes no sense. But what I find so interesting, so there's all kinds of things going on. It's happening in Texas. It's happening in Virginia. There's stuff happening in Florida. Here they are suing, the Biden administration is suing Virginia to put back on the voter roll the 6,300 non-citizens who declared themselves to be non-citizens. Make sense of that. But what I find really interesting as well is the Attorney General of Florida has sued the Biden administration for not helping them verify citizenship of their, voters. So the way it's supposed to work is you have DMVs in states are supposed to be working hand in hand with their registrars. And then the registrars are supposed to be able to verify through the Department of Homeland Security whether somebody is a citizen or not. And DHS is refusing to verify these Florida voters. And so the Attorney General of Florida has sued. So I'm telling you, this is a big, big fight. And I just want to add, there's one other really interesting piece that's kind of now starting to explode in all this. I don't know if you've heard about this yet. Have you heard about this issue around limited duration licenses?
No.
Okay. So a limited duration license is what somebody gets when they are not a citizen. Theoretically, they are allowed to be here, but they cannot vote. And there's all kinds of weird things happening around these limited duration licenses. So, I can tell you here in Virginia, last year, limited duration licenses were listed as one of the unacceptable forms of ID. Now they are considered an acceptable form of ID. Go figure. Why should that be an acceptable form of ID? Texas, same problem. They're fighting it in Texas.
Unreal.
So I'm telling you that I really think that the Democrats have got this very sort of systematic program in place to allow hanky-panky to go on. And thank goodness for our citizen warriors and legislators who are, every time they see something weird like this now, they're fighting it. Whereas I think in 2020, we just weren't understanding what was happening. I think we understand it a lot better. I'm just not 100% convinced yet that we're stopping enough of it.
See, this is the thing. We just talked to Ed Morrisey about what happens on election day and who wins. This is the stuff that concerns me. And it concerns me because I've noticed something in the news media as I've been studying kind of what's going on and what people are saying. You really have to listen to what the news media says because they drop these little tidbits that sort of normalize behavior. So when the event comes, all of a sudden you're like, oh, well, I guess we were told about that. And I've noticed this week, Katie, that there have been a lot of reporters who have been out there talking about how we should just expect there to be some things that happen on election day. No big deal. We're going to be able to get through it. And it'll take some time to count. It's almost like they're priming the pump for what they know might happen on election day. That to me is frightening because we know that the Democrat Party is using the media to disseminate messages for them. It's like their own public relations branch.
Yeah, it's as if they are, it's sort of like setting us up in a way, the way they did for January 6th. So yeah. It's very concerning. But again, I'm just going to say, I think the thing that reassures me is that so many people now have their eyes on this. There really is like an army of citizen warriors, citizen volunteers who've been digging into this stuff, who are keeping their eyes on this stuff. I take part in several sort of national coalition phone calls, keeping their eyes on what's happening with elections. And it's just amazing to me what people are able to do by analyzing the voter rolls, by analyzing the data, and catching things when they are bad. But I tell you what, I still am going to say what concerns me the most is that over the last number of years, because of the way I believe Democrats have jerry-rigged the rules in voting, I truly believe that tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of non-citizens have made it onto our voter rolls. And yeah. I'm going to tell you here in Virginia, we are going to have some very, very close races in the county, in the district right below me, congressional district 7. We've got a congressional race that everybody thought was going to go to the Democrat. It is neck and neck now. That race could absolutely come down to a few thousand, even a few hundred votes. And if you've got a significant number of non-citizens voting, it can determine the election.
Yep. I know. I mean, look, you're talking to somebody who lives in California, and I know a lot of people like to write off what happens in California, but the reason we got here into a state that is so deeply blue and one-party rule is because of things like this, systemically changing the way we run elections in our state. And our congressional races right now, my friend Mike Garcia, who's in Congress right now, the only Republican in LA County in Congress, it won his election by 333 votes.
Wow.
It is it is absolutely possible for illegal immigrants, people who are not supposed to vote, not supposed to be taking part in the election, to vote. And I'll tell you, in California, what's pretty disturbing is that we have, and I've shared this with you before, we have motor voter rules. So that means you can get a driver's license if you're an illegal immigrant. And as you get your driver's license, you are automatically registered to vote. You actually have to opt out if you are not qualified to vote. This is a problem. What's also a problem is that we have mail-in ballots now, universal in California. It used to be that we would have absentee ballots. If you needed to vote by mail, you could fill out a form, you could order an absentee ballot. But because of COVID, they now send a mail-in ballot to every single person in California. I've also found out that if you move, if you have a loved one who dies, you actually have to apply to take your name off the voter rolls, or you're going to continue to get ballots sent to addresses where those people no longer live. So you have the opportunity for 17 ballots to be going to one single family house. And it's happened. I've had listeners to my morning show talk about this. It's absolutely frightening. And you add into that the fact that Gavin Newsom has just recently, and I'm talking about in the last month, signed a bill that makes it illegal for anyone to ask for ID at polling places, and you've got yourself a big problem. And the only reason he had to sign that law, and this is so unbelievable, is that the little teeny tiny conservative pocket of Huntington Beach, California, passed a rule for their municipal elections that say you must show voter ID if you're voting in local elections in Huntington Beach. That's all they did. That was their choice to do it. But Gavin Newsom was so infuriated by that he challenged it and crafted a piece of legislation that no voter should have to show voter ID for any election in the state of California. Now, mind you,
this blows my mind. What is wrong with people? Oh, my gosh.
And one more thing, just to add. So, usually they say it's up to the local level to run these elections. Local elections, you come up with your own rule. Guess what you can do in Oakland? Guess what you can do in other cities in California?
What?
Illegals can vote in school board elections, in local elections. So if you are an illegal immigrant, it is okay in a handful of cities in California to vote in school board and local elections. So that jurisdiction is okay to allow illegals to participate in local elections, but the city and counties do not have jurisdiction if they want to require voter ID. The hypocrisy is rich, but this is California. And the warning is, if we aren't watching this stuff in all of these other states, at some point, the petri dish that is California for progressive nuts, it's going to spread to a state or city or county near you.
Yeah. Well, and I think that the message here is that a lot of people believe that there's nothing that they can do that can make a difference. But I'm telling you, I have watched extraordinary things be accomplished by everyday citizens that didn't know the first thing about voting or electoral systems, but they were alarmed, particularly by what they had seen, by what had happened in 2020. They started digging into it, and now it is incredible what they have been able to accomplish. So I just encourage more people to get involved, and everybody should be volunteering to work as an election officer, a poll watcher, a greeter. We have all got to step up and play a role in this upcoming election and get our country back.
And I have to say that having this conversation is not about taking the wind out of your sails at all. This is about encouraging you to get involved with the process, to see how it works, and to be the eyeballs there, because sometimes your eyes seeing something could save an election. The other piece is that and this is what we've done well in California now, in some of these key races. Do you do ballot curing in Virginia?
I don't. I feel terrible. I don't know the answer to that. What does it mean?
Penicillin for all of the ballots. So basically, because there are so many by mail ballots and people choose to vote by mail now, that they will match signatures. And so in these close races, they'll have volunteers come in to help cure ballots. That's another important thing. If you have a state that does a lot of by mail stuff, get involved in that process, because you can keep an eye on matching signatures. And in some races, when it gets really tight and they start going back through to look at all of those ballots, if there's a problem, if you've missed something, if something goes out of the line, they'll send the ballot back to you so that you have a second chance to fill it out after election day, and then those get reprocessed. So there is just a lot of different things that you can get involved with in the process. I also tell you, if you see something, say something. You need to contact, if you see a problem, your state's GOP, your county's GOP, and report those problems. Or, for instance, in California and Arizona, we have the Election Integrity Project that investigates these claims. We tell you this information not to make you sad or make you think, oh man, my vote doesn't count. It's to empower you, to tell you that we are not powerless in this process, that we can actually make a difference with our eyes, with our volunteer hours, and with our hard work.
And I just have to add one other little note. I've come to really believe strongly in yard signs and bumper stickers. It took me a long time to put the bumper sticker on my car, and I have it there now. I have never been keyed. Nobody's flipped me a bird. And I feel so good every time I come out to my car and I see my bumper sticker that says—
Is it a Trump sticker?
It says Team Trump.
I love it. I love it.
And I think I love the fact that I am part of Team Trump. And so I love that. And I'll tell you the other thing. I drove to see a friend the other day, and I drove around a neighborhood. This is the first time I've actually seen this here in Northern Virginia, because I would say for the most part, our Trump signs have been outdoing the Harris signs, even in blue Fairfax County.
In California too, by the way.
Yeah, but I went into one particular neighborhood where it was Harris after Harris after Harris after Harris. And I thought, I would imagine if you're a Trump supporter, that would be discouraging. And I don't want people to give into the bullying and feeling like you can't stand up and be proud that you're a Trump supporter. So I encourage everybody in these last couple of weeks, put the bumper sticker on the car, put the Trump sign in your house window, in your yard, put it out there, and just let's be proud of what we're fighting for.
Talk to people too. That's the easiest thing. Don't be ashamed, and ask people if they have a voting plan, if they are going to vote, if you can take them to go vote. Just do your part. I helped someone vote today. Actually, one of my employees said, will you help me with the proposition? And I took his ballot and I turned it into the mailbox for him. So you can do that stuff. It's easy as long as you are happy warriors out there and willing to have a conversation. And I have to tell you, I have seen now 2 cars, forget a bumper sticker, completely wrapped in Trump images in my neighborhood in Los Angeles.
Wow.
So let not your heart be troubled, because I'll tell you what, these people, I don't know if I'd wrap my car in Trump, but you know what? A bumper sticker sounds like a good place to start.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us for another episode. Get out there, vote. Again, make your plan, talk to people. We are here with you. Fighting the fight. It's ours to keep and ours to win. Make sure you get Katie's book. It's called Next Gen Marxism. It's available wherever you get your books. You should check out her website, katiegorka.org. And of course, check her out on Facebook. Search for Catherine Gorka, or you can find her on X, Gorka Katie. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram at Jennifer Horn Radio, and you can find me on Truth and on X at Jennifer Horn. Keep those 5-star reviews coming. We love knowing you are out there, and share Happy Women with your friends. SalemPodcastNetwork.com to connect with us on all of our platforms. And thanks for joining us. It's another episode of the Happy Women Podcast.